All right. We will go now then to Mr. Robb. Sir, the floor is yours. You've got 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and thank you to the councillors for taking time to listen to your citizens on this important issue. Democracy can be a pretty lumpy process, and as Mr. Churchill observed years ago, it's probably a terrible political system, but it just happens to be the best among we've found so far. No? I live in a very old part of Calgary and in a very old house, 110 years old, but it's by choice. I have one bathroom for 4 bedrooms. Can you imagine that? Stone Age conditions. But we do have a healthy and vibrant and mixed society here in Elbow Park. Mixed generations, mixed housing and shapes and styles and ages. And it's a low-density old neighborhood. And we are the oldest couple on the block, which has many toddlers and elementary school children. So many that our local schools are full to overflowing. Mayor Nenshi himself has come twice to our annual block party on 7th Street, which has been an annual event for 20 years and has a wonderful unifying effect in our community, and we have a very strong community in Elbow Park. We fully support the position of the Elbow Park Residents Association that this guidebook needs revision to reflect the concerns of many citizens and community associations who have lined up against it. It appears that the adage, follow the money, applies here. That's the only conclusion we can come to. Densification is the message in the guidebook as currently written, and that obviously involves an increasing tax base and seriously new multifamily construction in old, previously zoned differently neighborhoods. The same planning department who backed this guidebook supported the suburban sprawl and forced the inner city taxpayer to fund through steadily rising taxes municipal roads and services, including leisure centers, to meet the new community's demand. They now apparently want to destroy the R1 neighborhoods to meet a vague diversity plan. Contrary to the pitch of the planners, the affected communities were not involved in the final document and now stand united against the passing of this law without amendment to reflect the concerns of the neighborhoods affected. How ironic for council to pass into law a guidebook against which the wishes of the concerned citizens, saying, trust us, we will listen to your concerns and needs later on a case-by-case approach, but we have no time to listen to your concerns today. There is no previous history for the trust us, we know what's good for you approach. The same planning department, as I said, approved the sprawl of cookie-cutter housing to the city limits and renders the inner city citizens very skeptical about the motives and money behind this guidebook, which apparently is for urban developers who appear to be the main beneficiaries of this sweeping change. This blueprint for the future of our city should either go to a full referendum or at least be postponed until the next election so that the taxpayer can hear each candidate's views on this important city-changing topic. To sneak it into law during the pandemic with its attending side effects and then have many councillors not run for re-election causes concern as to motives. Council will gain credibility and respect of the city citizens and taxpayers by declaring, we hear you, and we will take a step back and work with the affected communities to create a guidebook that reflects the will and desires of the inner city residents who apparently are the target. Marching ahead and implementing the guidebook as currently written will toxify urban relations with City Hall for decades and further the hostility gap between the elected and governed, and as well as public appreciation for city services. To the mayor and the council, please listen to the citizens. Stand back, reconsider, and revise your approach on this guidebook. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Let's go to Mr. Doyle, please. Are you there, Mr. Doyle?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
The floor is yours. Thank you.
My name is Chris Doyle. Thank you for giving me the time to speak. I live in a single-family detached home in what is predominantly an R1 community. After following the guidebook process for several years and seeing some of the reaction to the guidebook in recent days, I wanted to speak here to challenge the idea that neighborhoods and communities should be or even could be static. I currently live in the same neighborhood I grew up in as a teenager in the 90s. At that time, there was a water slide park, an indoor mini golf course, a movie theater, a YMCA, all within walking distance. As the community aged and the population declined, all of those amenities have disappeared. In the case of 3 out of 4 of those amenities, their locations still sit as vacant lots today. I've attended meetings where local schools face losing academic programs or even altogether closure as the demographics of the area have changed. So far, my neighborhood has been lucky and kept our schools, but only at the expense of school closures in adjacent areas. I've watched local businesses struggle and leave. In the past, our city has tended to build single-generation infrastructure, continually closing schools and facilities in the inner city as new neighborhoods on the edge of the city require new ones. This is an expensive way to build a city, and we're seeing the results in our tax bills. It's poorly managed growth that's been driving our tax increases, not bike lanes or art projects. Cities and communities constantly change and evolve. The question is, do we want to let things continue on their current trajectory, or do we want to work towards enhancing the sustainability of these communities? We need to make sure we're building a city that will be competitive in the future. As traffic and transit patterns have changed, it's become obvious that in many areas, the current zoning, which was laid out decades ago, no longer reflects the most appropriate or relevant land use. I've heard the excuse that now is not the time to move forward with the guidebook because so much is changing. How people work, play, and move around our city is being reshaped by technology. Most recently, this process has been accelerated by a global health crisis. There's no question that the pace of change will continue in predictable and unpredictable ways. The guidebook provides a framework with the options and flexibility that our city will need to adapt and capitalize on this change, ensuring our city remains a desirable place to live. Approving the guidebook at this time is critical in order for communities to move forward with local area plans. The development of local area plans will ensure that community members can contribute to the discussion around a neighborhood's evolution. I don't want to diminish the hard work that the city's planning department and engaged Calgarians have put in over the last several years in the guidebook, but this is in many ways a small first step. It's the beginning of a conversation on how we grow and shape our neighborhoods, not the end. In conclusion, I would ask that the Council approve the guidebook as proposed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Doyle. Let's go to Mr. Haughey, please. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Hello, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity today. My name is Doug Haughey. My wife, Karen, and I are residents of Elbow Park, as many others you've heard on this call. We built a single-family home in this community about 5 years ago, specifically because of the detached single-family nature of the community, you know, the treed streets, the setbacks, you know, a family-oriented neighborhood that it is. But we agree with many people who feel the guidebook looks like an unfair assault on the Zone A inner-city single-family detached neighborhoods. We also agree that if implemented without amendment, it could fundamentally damage the characteristics of these communities that specifically make them great, which, in my view, is exactly the opposite of what the guidebook is supposed to be achieving. But, you know, you're going to hear a lot more of that from other folks. What I would like to do, though, is focus on one other troubling observation that became apparent when we started digging into the process itself. You know, much has been said by councillors in the administration about misinformation out there, you know, which I have no doubt is true. But I think this actually cuts both ways. The administration's presentation yesterday, for example, highlighted the myths and facts material on the website as balanced and informative. You know, but I actually think it's a clear example of the problem itself. It seems pretty obvious that the city has carefully curated, you know, a lot of that material, focusing on the extreme views that are out there, while conveniently shifting attention away from the more legitimate and balanced concerns that many of us have. You know, so here's a couple of examples from that Myths and Facts webpage. In refuting some of the most extreme myths, you know, the city has said the guidebook does not prevent single-family homes from being built, or the guidebook does not pre-approve zoning nor change in the development process. You know, those are interesting comments, but no serious person is saying that. You know, what you've done is selectively highlight the most exaggerated concerns, refute the exaggeration, and then talk about all the misinformation that's out there, all the while ignoring the legitimate balanced concerns that many reasonable people have with respect to the guidebook. You know, the city's core message has been that we shouldn't worry about the guidebook because the local area planning process and zoning does not change. That's been repeated over and over again publicly by councillors and the city. It was even repeated a couple of nights ago on Global TV when someone representing the city looked into the camera with a straight face and essentially said, "Don't worry, nothing changes." But everybody in this call today knows that for Zone A inner-city single-family detached residential neighborhoods, the guidebook changes everything. The whole purpose of the guidebook is to set a policy framework for local area planning processes and zoning decisions. Page 14 of the guidebook itself is clear that the guidebook will guide land use, local area plans, and outcomes. So for you to say that, you know, move on, folks, it's no big deal, nothing to see here, that is just wrong. And it's no wonder then people are concerned about the process. The guidebook will have huge consequences for inner-city communities. It will obviously inform and influence local area plans and zoning decisions in the future. And to say it doesn't change anything, you know, may be technically true right now, but it's clearly not truthful. And so we would respectfully submit that, number one, I think the city needs to drop the talking point that the guidebook doesn't change anything, because we all know that it does. And secondly, we believe the guidebook itself needs to be sent back for amendment to specifically address the legitimate concerns of Zone A inner-city single-family detached residential neighborhoods and commit to retaining the character of those vital communities. So that's all I had. Thanks for the opportunity and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for being here and providing your perspective, Mr. Haughey. Let's go to Michele Williams, please. Are you there, Ms. Williams?
Yes, I am.
The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Michele Williams, and I am speaking today to oppose the passing of the Guidebook for Great Communities as written. I'm a born and raised Calgarian, currently residing in Oval Park. The Guidebook as written does not support my investment in my home and community. The planner's assertion that they have consulted and worked collaboratively with Calgarians and various stakeholders in developing the Guidebook, while I am sure true, has failed to reach the level of engagement necessary for a document that is aiming for such a far-reaching and lasting impact. This failure is evidenced by the number of Calgarians who continue to come forward saying that they have not ever even heard of the Guidebook, let alone it reflects their interest. It might be a worthwhile exercise for Calgarians to be made aware of exactly who was consulted in the development of the Guidebook, as now it feels the planners engaged in concocting their own small pool of evidence designed to drive their own conclusions. Furthering this point of limited engagement, the city inviting a public hearing on the day of the vote on the Guidebook feels rushed and frankly a bit hollow. The town of Canmore regularly invites its constituents for a full week of input before a vote that will impact their community, a practice that feels a much more magnanimous process. And in the name of not rushing this vote, I think it would be an interesting data point to understand the level of satisfaction in the North Hill communities with their LAP that has been developed with the Guidebook. Did those community members feel their interests were reflected? Are they happy? How are we metricing the success of their LAP, and what are the costs associated with implementing the LAP? I think this information should be made available and reviewed before the Guidebook is passed. It seems like an important point of interest that is not being considered as this vote is being undertaken. Beyond the deficiencies around community engagement, my opposition to the Guidebook stems from its lack of protection for neighborhoods of single detached family homes. While the process towards redevelopment, as I have been reminded many times in the Guidebook learning sessions and during this hearing, does remain the same, But at the end of this same process will be the guidebook, literally guiding the decision to subdivision and densification. And while I have also heard a number of times again during the session that this eventuality is not a certainty under the guidebook, but in a neighborhood like Elbow Park that is exclusively RC1, and with the guidebook's assertion that neighborhoods must move towards greater density with housing options for all and at various price points, what other expectation could I or my neighbors possibly have? And if in fact these conclusions are all incorrect, then the guidebook has also failed in that it has not provided clarity or comfort for Calgarians, but rather stress, anxiety, and ambiguity, particularly miserable at this difficult time of COVID and our struggling economy. The unfortunate truth is the City of Calgary has a reputation of approving new bills that ignore current bylaws, existing setbacks, and the character of adjacent homes, with little or no regard for the depth of opposition to these new builds from the community. One recent development in Marda garnered 320 letters of opposition from the community, and yet approval for the project moved swiftly through council with no amendments or regard for the community's views. In fact, in my view, Marda is a shining example of why Calgarians are or should be leery of the guidebook. The multi-unit homes and multi-story apartments are rammed next to heritage homes. The increased density, dramatic uptick in traffic flow has only eroded the character and enjoyment of the Marda Loop community. In this repeated trend of not listening to a homeowner or community's opposition to redevelopment, the city's own track record has laid a rich groundwork for our collective distrust of the guidebook. The guidebook's fictional mother and child day out storyline only furthers our distrust, as its depiction of a green, lush Calgary is not a reality most of the year, but rather we experience cold and snow, and we are frankly grateful for a car, and even more so for a parking spot. The narrative as is in the guidebook immediately puts the reader on their back foot, wondering who wrote this thing and where they live. Similarly, strolling between independent shops is a nice idea, but again ignores our climate, as well as the truly unfortunate trend where many of our local shops have succumbed to e-commerce, big box stores, and the impossible escalation of property taxes.
And you are at time, ma'am, so I'll ask you to wrap up in one sentence, please.
We need a plan, and expectations around development need to be set, but the guidebook as currently written is not that plan. And the city and planners need to up their game with more meaningful engagement that fosters trust, communication, and collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you. We will go to Mr. Vainshtein, please. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, you did pretty well. It's Vainshtein.
I wasn't right at all. I got all the vowels wrong. All right, Mr. Vainshtein, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Pretty close. I've heard much worse. Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Vainshtein. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to share my support for the Guidebook for Great Communities. Currently, I'm a student at the University of Calgary in my final semester of the Master of Planning program in the School of Architecture, Planning, and Landscape. I'm also very fortunate to have recently started working as a Planning and Development Officer for Foothills County. I was very excited to have the opportunity to speak today on a topic that I believe will garner substantial benefits for the City of Calgary. In essence, when working with planning documents, whether statutory or not, they pertain to the city and its subsequent residents. Just as we are here today in a public hearing, I believe planning matters and documents should be clear and understandable for all those whom it may pertain to. What better way to create an understandable document than a guidebook? Similar to how you would look at an instruction manual when you purchase a new piece of furniture to assemble, I believe that the Guidebook for Great Communities serves as a transparent and understandable resource for the City of Calgary and its residents. Communities make up Calgary. As a student and young professional, I'm seeing my friends my age opt to move communities where cost of living is much higher. These friends of mine are prepared to leave their friends and family to move elsewhere and endure significant challenges. Moreover, it is sad to see individuals who I know are assets to our city leave and take their talents elsewhere. When I ask them why they want to leave, the answers always boil down to their uncertainty of Calgary's future. Calgary has been experiencing varying challenges that leave residents concerned. As a student and as a planner, I believe that our communities within our cities have immense potential to enable change to better the future of Calgary. The Guidebook is an opportunity to plan Calgary's future, to adapt and consider change in a city that is experiencing hardship. Planning for the future is a challenge, and establishing certainty for Calgarians is very difficult. That is why establishing a framework for area redevelopment plans through a Guidebook is a great idea. As a planning student and a young professional, it has become very clear to me that there is a large opportunity to bridge the gap between planning and the residents of our city. In school and in practice, I have learned that a good plan takes into consideration all parties and stakeholders. There's an ongoing challenge in our profession to ensure we reach those impacted by any and all plans, especially now in the complex social environment we are faced with, the ongoing pandemic. A Guidebook that does not contain jargon and instead aims to be a tool accessible to all stakeholders, partners, and the public is a tremendous effort and another reason I support it. The Guidebook for Great Communities offers an opportunity to create a foundation for success at the community level. The Guidebook is a comprehensive tool that offers a clear and consistent approach to planning or revitalizing communities and is the first step in ensuring that when our communities change, that change leads to subsequent benefits for our citizens, economy, industries, and more. Efforts such as the Guidebooks will lead to bettering our communities in Calgary and in turn may keep young professionals and talent like my friends from leaving our city. Thank you for taking the time to hear me speak today. I hope you've heard the opportunities the Guidebook for Great Communities possesses. I'm very passionate about Calgary, and I'm excited for the future that the Guidebook offers our great city and its communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for taking your time to be with us today. That is the end of this panel, and I do not see any questions.
Mr. Wilhelm's on the line.
Oh, are you? Okay. Well, why don't you go ahead?
I missed the call out. Sorry, I was on another call.
No problem. Why don't you go ahead now, and I'll put you in before we finish this panel.
I appreciate it. Good morning, Your Worship, or good afternoon, Your Worship, and members of Council. My name is Mike Wilhelm, and I'm president of the Shaganappi Community Association. I'm here to convey Shaganappi's support of the Guidebook. I challenged a player in the development community with a reputation for being open-minded and looking to live in a very nice inner-city neighborhood, and I asked him if he identified with his housing form. It made him mad. He suggested it was the character of the neighborhood that appealed to him. I guess it really comes down to the nature of character. But the issue goes deeper than this. As a self-made oil and gas executive, I too have been lost in the things that I, do to fully consider the standing of the building I live in. So my 50s bungalow in a rapidly changing community is not a big deal to me. But it's an important measure of aspirational social standing to many others. Is it my business to judge that? Something many do identify with and acquire a sense of stability in? And if so, and maybe it is it a winning battle to have when many are out there who might be retired, newly liberated from the energy industry, or losing their client base, and thus all of which have the time to fight this with nothing to lose? Better to get them on side. When I explained, my interaction with this friend in the business community to another friend, a member of a visible minority, an immigrant who arrived as a child, who aspired his whole life to live in a Tony inner-city neighborhood, who strongly advocates on social equity, that the consequences might apply to his own neighborhood in this way, he was visibly upset. The Guidebook is the right thing to do, but not this way, with some, particularly on social media, effectively judging people for the choices they made after the fact. And we have a corresponding anonymous campaign from the other side of the argument on the social media. And this has been covered at length over the last 2 days. The stakes are too high for our community to risk being caught in Shaganappi, being caught between the two sides in this undeclared class war. Having survived 6 separate city planning engagements, 12 years, in Shaganappi, we need to have clear paths from where we are to what we want to accomplish with city staff. And for us, anonymous has never been a privilege to hide behind for long. There's a fundamental difference between bylaw and policy, and many speakers have addressed this point. In our experience, policy, even the statutory, is hard to enforce if it conflicts with bylaw. We have 3 ARPs, and they're all hard to enforce. Bylaw is not. A sophisticated applicant will generally use bylaw override by statutory policy. With the guidebook, existing stakeholders lose nothing. Many speakers in the last couple of days have and will speak on behalf of bylaw protections that are not subject to the document being reviewed. Many purport to speak for communities, but importantly, perhaps to their personal property interests. They're, of course, entitled to do this, but that's a fight for the bylaw component of the discussion if and when we get there. I think staff who are working their butts off on this would readily admit this rollout has not gone well. We see good people striving to do good work, some of whom were both well-intentioned but perhaps naive. But, quote, no new and innovative approaches to engagement, particularly the rollout of the local area plan working groups at Westbrook and North Hill in particular, appear to intentionally, initially, marginalize legitimate and affected property interests, particularly to the stakeholders themselves. We knew it wouldn't work. We told them it wouldn't work. It didn't work, and it's never worked with us, and it's already clear in Shaganappy that it won't work. We had only one letter of opposition to blanket zoning on main streets and one letter against. One letter against and multiple letters in favor. So we can actually engage our community in change. So we are less concerned, and it's supported by major landowners in the area. We're now confident that our individual residents will have a say in their local area plan. So I know Lisa spoke to this yesterday. She's now correct. Engagement is indeed moving ahead in the right direction, and maybe it's not all that new. Let's bring it back to first principles, building great buildings and great communities, and maybe set some targets for each local area plan and within each local area plan as well, so we know how we're doing against the targets. Right now, we don't have those. The guidebook now functions as it should, as a contextual document that frames the work in local area plans, like ours at Westbrook. Carrying the ball in a lot of planning initiatives that caused Shaganappy to appreciate a multi-community approach, and we like the idea of finally getting in our local area plans for neighbors in Clarendon, Glengarry, and Spruce Cliff in particular. Framed as an opportunity to bring these communities to the table and into Shaganappy's existing planning framework, we see no substantive or incremental risk in this.
Okay, you are at time, Mr. Wilhelm, so I'll ask you to wrap up in a sentence, please.
Okay. We support the guidebook, but we'll need time to understand the implications of the single detached policy area, and we want to understand the exclusions around that. Therefore, we support the guidebook, and we want to move forward. Please engage us in the special policy or area amendments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilhelm, and thank you, too, for your leadership in the community. I'm so happy we're hearing from so many great community association presidents here. All right, I think that takes us to the end of this panel, so thank you all very much on this panel. I'll just ask if there's anyone whose name I've called who I missed who is now on the line.
Have you called Hugoline Morton?
I have, in fact. Would you like to be the first one in the next panel?
Oh, certainly.
All right. I'll put you as number one in the next one. Is there anyone else? All right. So let me call for some folks.
Your Worship.
Yes?
I'm sorry, I couldn't get my RTS to speak for that last panel. Was that possible?
Well, they may have hung up already, but you can try.
Mike, are you still on the line? Mike Wilhelm? Oh, looks like I might have lost him.
I think
That's okay.
Lost him. He's one of your community association presidents. You know where to find him. All right.
Yep, thanks.
Teresa Tousignant, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, you'll be number 2 on this panel. How about Jacqueline Grabowski?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, you'll be number 3. How about Linda Wiggins? Linda, are you there? All right. Estelle Ducatel.
Estelle can join you shortly.
Okay, she'll be number 4 on this panel, so just let her know, please. And Susan Trylinski. Susan, are you there? All right, how about Robert White? Are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, Mr. White, you're going to be number 5 on this panel, okay?
Okay.
All right, let's jump back now to Ms. Morton. Are you there, Ms. Morton?
I am.
All right, the floor. Oh, did I skip? I did. Oh my goodness. I skipped somebody. Please hold if you don't mind. Sonia Johnson, are you there?
Sorry, Sonia is working right now, so she's going to be calling in later.
Okay, just have her email the clerk when she gets back, okay?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so let us go now to Ms. Morton. The floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Hugoline Morton, and I'm a 13-year resident of Elbow Park. I spoke recently at PUD on the Guidebook and my concerns with the North Hill LAP as it relates to caveats and restrictive covenants. I wanted to note that I was extremely reticent to speak today because of my experience at PUD. I'm a working mother of 3 and waited from 9 until 5 for my chance to speak, and when I did finally get the chance, I was in the middle of preparing dinner for my family. Councillor Giancarlo Carra was extremely aggressive towards me.
All of our representatives are assisting other callers at this time.
Oh dear.
Your call is very important to us.
Sorry, Ms. Morton. Let's hope that that's the first time that's ever happened in a year of doing this.
Okay.
So let's just ask everyone to look at their devices and hit mute, please. I think we've lost the feedback. No, there's still an echo. Everybody again, look at your devices and hit mute, please. Okay, I think we're okay now. Go ahead, Ms. Morton.
Okay, so I was just saying that at PUD, when I spoke about caveats and restrictive covenants, Councillor Giancarlo Carra was very aggressive towards me, and Councillor Willie, while more respectful, fell short of the appropriate tone with a citizen, voter, and taxpayer. I also found that the power imbalance was completely unfair, both with respect to the process, waiting all day to speak, and the people involved, because it's paid politicians and bureaucrats versus volunteers. I'm glad to see that the councillors today have been more respectful of the citizens of Calgary, although I do note that I did hear that that was not absolutely the case yesterday. I echo all of the points made by the Elbow Park residents that have preceded me with respect to the Guidebook and the threat that it poses to the single-family designation Elbow Park as a neighborhood has. As I've already tried to make my point about caveats and restrictive covenants, I wish to address another issue regarding the Guidebook, and it's the myth that Elbow Park and single-family neighborhoods are exclusionary. I understand that one of the rationales for the integration of row houses, duplexes, and other dense housing options in neighborhoods that are currently RC1, such as Elbow Park, is to support housing and mobility choices for people. Further, city representatives have stated that single-family neighborhoods are exclusionary and that people should be able to live in the community of their choice, not just what they can afford. There have also been implications that single-family neighborhoods are part of systemic racism. First of all, I disagree that providing for row houses, duplexes, and other dense housing options in Elbow Park will allow people the choice to live here. By definition, Elbow Park land costs are very high, and even dense housing options will be priced at a point that will be out of reach for the middle and low-income bracket. As such, the Guidebook will not achieve the objective that people should be able to live in the community of their choice, not just what they can afford. Second of all, the implication that single-family neighborhoods are part of systemic racism is incorrect. I am a first-generation Dutch immigrant married to a first-generation Chinese immigrant. Our family is biracial. Our neighbors directly across the street, which is a very desirable and expensive street on a beautiful ridge in Elbow Park, include an immigrant family from Hong Kong, another first-generation Dutch immigrant married to a first-generation Indian immigrant, and their family is biracial, and a senior immigrant couple from China by way of Taiwan and the United States. Further, 2 of my closest friends on the next street over are Indian immigrants from Kenya and England, as well as a first-generation Indian immigrant with another biracial family. Elbow Park is indeed very, very diverse. Lastly, I wanted to ask a question about the effects of the Guidebook on schools. I understand that some neighborhoods have schools with low enrollment and that they are facing closure. That is not the case where we live. Due to physical space constraints at my children's school, each of my 3 children has been in a shared kindergarten class, meaning 2 classes share 1 room. For example, last year, my son was in the kindergarten classroom with 44 other students and 2 teachers for a total of 46 people in a standard-sized classroom. Increased density in our neighborhood will definitely exacerbate this problem. What is the plan for inner-city schools if the guidebook is approved, and how will the CBE increase space capacity at the schools that are affected? Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. I can just quickly answer your question, which is that the city has no jurisdiction over schools, unfortunately. Sometimes I wish we did, but the school boards do use population projections as they're thinking about which schools to open and close. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. May I respond to that?
No,
think that
actually, you can't. Sorry, your 5 minutes are up, and we do have to be strict about the rules. But love to have that conversation offline anytime. All right, let's go to Ms. Teresa Tousignant, and tell me how to pronounce your name to start with.
Tousignant.
Tousignant, not bad. Okay, I mean, I was not bad. The name is lovely. I mean, I was not bad in the pronunciation. The floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Teresa Tousignant. I live in Councillor Farkas's Ward 11 in a single-family home. I volunteer as the Director of Planning for the Haysboro Community Association, and I am the Haysboro delegate to the Heritage Communities Local Area Plan Working Group. I support the guidebook. Sorry, I am getting echo.
You know, actually, you're fine in the room, so if it's not bothering you too much...
Is it okay there?
Yeah, please keep going.
Okay. I'll keep going. I'm asking the Council to vote in favor of accepting the guidebook and to be proactive in getting it working as soon as possible. It is a living document with a built-in refinement method, and that process can be started right away. Please allocate sufficient funding to the local area plan process. Prioritize neighborhoods that are at critical inflection points of decline or revitalization. In the longer term, I do want people everywhere in Calgary to have a chance to think through how they want their own neighborhood to look 10 or 20 years down the road. I want property owners and developers and business owners to have a shared reference when making private investment choices. That way we can leverage private investment dollars toward making our city even more attractive to newcomers and more functional for everyone already here. There was a speaker yesterday who asked, what is the problem the guidebook is trying to solve? It's a really good question. There are lots of beautiful, well-to-do parts of Calgary, and there are places in every neighborhood that are special and working well. Lots of us love living in suburban style in the heart of a big city. We get all the benefits of both. We get the space, the light, the backyards of the suburbs, and we get access to inner-city amenities and services. The problem is, it's financially crushing to have too low a population density. We're simply not paying enough taxes to cover the infrastructure costs of living in such a diffuse fashion. People have spoken about how they pay high taxes for the privilege of living in single-family homes in wealthy neighborhoods, but neither they nor any other homeowner in Calgary is paying taxes at the level that is needed to support just our infrastructure maintenance costs alone. I recommend that everyone listening to this call read the letter submitted to the city record by Nathan Harlick at the February 3rd meeting of the Standing Policy Committee on Planning and Urban Development. It's an eye-opener. By his analysis, the city would need to collect $1,277 for every $100,000 worth of private property in order to fund our infrastructure needs. If you own property, think about it. How much would you pay if you were asked to cover your share of the infrastructure costs? Does it change what you think about the value of higher population density? What other problems is the guidebook trying to address? There's child-friendly streets, walkability, bikeability, access to transit, access to affordable housing, protection of heritage assets, protection of trees. There's lots of good urban policy in the guidebook. It can be used to fill in the serious gaps in Calgary city planning. The local area plans will give guidance at the scale of our daily life, for our community and for the ones immediately around it. I want my neighborhood to go through its redevelopment years in a smart, intentional way. The development that is happening right now is piecemeal and is simply not made to respond to a larger vision that benefits us as a whole. By and large, people mostly want to live in neighborhoods that are very much like what they are right now. They chose to live there. They just want them to be a little bit better, a little safer with some more economic activity and a few more amenities. We can move toward that by filling in the gaps, by gently adding density where it's appropriate, and intensively adding density in strategic locations. We need to bring population density back up to an economically sound level. Here's a specific example. Haysboro was dairy farmland in the 1950s. Our homes and our schools and businesses were laid out based on average household size of the time, which was 4 people per household. Development took place over the 60s, population numbers peaked in the 70s, and then they declined over time, in line with average household size. The average household size in Alberta is now 2.6 and isn't rising. We don't have more houses in our neighborhood than we did 50 years ago. We simply have fewer people, and that hollows out our community. St. Gerard's Elementary School is probably going to close next year. Small businesses struggle. The YMCA left our neighborhood for a newer neighborhood further out. Now we have an empty dirt lot where we used to have a pool facility that people could swim at before taking the train downtown to work. What would help here is for us to allow a little more intensive residential use of land in places where it makes sense. Near the train station, near existing commercial centers, near amenities, along collector roads, and at the corners of blocks. With more people, we can better support amenities, we can better support businesses, we can better support our schools. With more people, we can spread the tax burden around. I expect my city councillors to act in the interest of us all. I expect you to make choices that will bring private investment in our city to a healthy level. I expect you to look at our financial and social and climate resilience problems head on and get to the hard work of solving them. Approving this guidebook is a positive step in that direction. Please do not allow further delay on this subject. Please vote in favor of the guidebook. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Right on the button on 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Let's go to Jacqueline Grabowski, please. Are you there, Jacqueline?
Hi, thank you. Yep, here I am.
The floor is yours.
Can you hear me? Thank you. So my name is Jacqueline Grabowski, and I'm speaking as a community member and active participant in the Heritage Communities Working Group. And I also participated in the Guidebook Focus Group. I am here today to voice my support for the Guidebook. I'm excited to know that with your support, established communities can finally move forward with their local area planning, a process that's been on hold since mid-2020. I thank the councillors who supported this document in majority at last PUD meeting and hope you'll continue to support the document today, recognizing its function and merit. This week we've seen a sudden surge of concerned citizens, many of them called to action by the selfish election campaign efforts of Ward 11 Councillor Varkas. Provincial partisan groups have all of a sudden come involved.
Sorry, Ms. Grabowski, I have to be fair, and I should have done it a couple of speakers ago as well. Just please try not to be personal about members of council and their motivations, but please continue.
Okay, motivations aside, there's been a lot of misinformation, and I think a lot of us deserve an apology. Please do not let people with bad information or partisan politics hijack our city's future. The guidebook is badly needed and well overdue for approval. A few key points that I continue to emphasize, and I agree with a lot of Teresa's points. She was very well spoken and eloquent about all the issues facing our local area planning group. We all have a voice, and more so in our local area plan. The guidebook is broad intentionally because it's to be specifically applied with local voices to incorporate your unique neighborhood. The LEP is the phase most appropriate for communities to dig into the details, come together over the vision, and articulate it in LEP. The LEP then goes through additional engagement. We need the guidebook approved so that we can get there. The guidebook has been extensively vetted through both private industry and citizens. It's been tested through concurrent local area planning processes and has spent the past year in revision. The development process is not changing. As many members of council are hearing, there are common threads of concern being pushed. I did circulate a recent article from the Globe and Mail by Alex Bozikavus, I cannot pronounce it, Planning for the Future, where he points to the dangers of continuously allowing the protection of single-family homes to run planning discourse. I circulated it, and it includes phrases, that phrases such as neighborhood character and stable single-family homes are often used to shield a system rooted in class divide and racism. Restrictive covenants keep on being brought up. One of the city's first restrictive covenants ever used was one to ban ownership by the Black population of homes. When we continue to block change and allow for specific exceptions for those wealthy enough to fight for them, we're saying that we support a class system where only the affluent can have their say and continue living in protected single-family homes while the rest are pushed to undesirable areas or where the neighbors are less powerful. I want to make sure we consider the bigger picture for our city, that we keep the youth and we keep them wanting to live here, and also that many people are going to be future seniors. Are they being considered in our city? Homeowners, transit users, residents who like to live in townhomes, multi-generational households, renters, and the underrepresented citizens need to be in this conversation. This guidebook has faced extreme delays, and we cannot continue to be deadlocked. I live in an established area and see large parcels of vacant land going undeveloped. My son's school is likely closing this year because of low population, and there's continuous loss of amenities such as our local YMCA. We had optimism as a community to come together in a clear vision and had started our local area plan. There's so much more to say about the merits of the guidebook, but I hope that if anything, I can provide any added value to you by answering questions you may have about my experience becoming involved in the process as a community member, what our LAP processes look like so far, or any questions you may have to provide you with the confidence to approve the guidebook today. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you for being here. Just getting a bit of an echo. No, it seems to be gone. All right. Let's go to Estelle Ducatel. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, Mayor Nenshi and councillors. My name is Estelle Ducatel, and I'm a Mount Pleasant resident. My comments today are going to mostly pertain to the North Hill development plan, more so than the guidebook. I was told that council would want to hear about the experience of residents like myself that are in the pilot North Hill plan area. I request that council not approve the guidebook and the North Hill plan due to the following. I feel like the engagement process was biased. 2, those that are aware of these documents generally do not support them, and far too many of them do not know about these documents. Specifically, the North Hill plan fails to address these concerns that were raised by residents with regard to parking and traffic and residential form and size, both on the neighborhood local, limited scale, and these connector or low scale size. The documents are specifically punitive to recent inner-city redevelopment because they offer no consideration for the impact the changes will present on new residences built over the last 10 to 15 years under R1 and R2 zoning when these offsetting properties are redeveloped. Calgarians should have the opportunity to vote on these documents at the next ballot. Their impact will be more significant financially by means of erosion of property value than the cost of the Olympic 2026 would have been on my taxes. Some community associations, mine included, did not consult with their members prior to making their final submission to council for today's meeting, and their recommendations are not aligned with the majority of the community's position on these documents. Regarding the engagement process, I felt that there was poor communication upon the rollout. I only heard about this plan mid-2019. By then, there was no longer an opportunity to get involved. I tried, the work groups were full. But even then, a Mount MPCA member at the time that sat on the committee told me that even though, and I quote, those of us that were in the working group have felt that the city had an agenda or a final desired state right from the beginning. Further quote, I have told the city in the work group meetings that we do not agree on their interpretation of the low density, but they have council policy direction on it and are moving it forward. I attended the open house held at the end of 2019. Not one member of the planning team was taking notes. It was more like an opportunity to be told what the final plan would look like than to have an opportunity to actually influence. In February 2020, the city emailed an update under Phase 4, Realize, stating, and I quote, citizens shared general agreement with the placement of urban categories. Based on the hundreds of comments that I read online, I really don't see how planning could possibly have made this general statement. There are AI sentiment analysis tools that are available to quickly classify responses into 3 categories, such as positive, neutral, and negative. Proper analysis of the comments must be done before such general comments can be made. Under the Phase 4 Realize summary, at least the summary did acknowledge that there were the following concerns that were raised by the citizens, but the plan continues to fail to address them. Those are that citizens do not want to see the limited scale throughout the residential streets or that RCG equivalent housing type. Citizens want to see policies to mitigate the impact of higher scale development on lower scale development. Citizens expressed concerns over increased traffic and parking needs with higher density. I conducted a survey that was distributed to residents to see how others felt about the North Hill plan. I got 235 responses. Unfortunately, community associations were unwilling to help me distribute the survey despite clearly indicating it had no affiliation with the city nor a community association. Results were sent to all the councillor offices that responded to my emails last year in preparation for the 2020 hearing for these documents. My main findings: of those that participated in providing feedback, 22% felt their concerns were heard. Regarding the local urban limited scale, 68% either disagreed or strongly disagreed with this form on all residential streets. Only 8% of respondents had no concerns. 34% were most concerned about reduced value to property and loss of enjoyment. Regarding the neighborhood housing minor low scale, or the 6 stories on the busier corridors, only 10% of the respondents had no concerns, while 43% were most concerned about the size being too big and the negative impact offsetting properties. 60% of the respondents said they would not make the same property purchase decision knowing what they now know about the North Hill plan. 71% of the respondents opposed the plan as was presented. A grandfathering clause adding restrictions on land coverage or height to the limited or low-scale development that directly offsets a property built in the last 15 to 20 years would alleviate many concerns residents like myself have. Newer inner-city homes were required to respect the privacy of adjacent property, yet the new limited-scale development will allow the land to be essentially completely covered and built to a higher height, removing all privacy and natural sunlight from newer properties.
You are at time, so I'll ask you just to wrap up, please.
Yep, my last sentence. I am asking that for council to reject the North Hill plan until it is amended to protect the value of newer inner city redevelopment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for taking your time to be here with us. Let's go to Robert White, please. Mr. White, are you there? Oh, did we lose Mr. White?
Mayor Nancy, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Go ahead. But I am getting a bad echo, so I'll ask everyone else to put themselves on mute, please. And if you're following along on the computer, turn off your speaker. There we go. Go ahead, Mr. White.
Okay, good afternoon, Mayor Nancy and council members. My name is Robert White. My wife Ann and I have lived in Elbow Park for nearly 50 years and have seen many changes over those years. Most of these changes have been for the betterment of our community. Many of the 50s vintage bungalows have been replaced by new 2-story houses. We consider this as a positive renewal of our community. The removal of some of the more historic homes would be an example of negative change. I want to keep my presentation short, as I don't have any real new opinions or perspectives that have not been presented by many other speakers. I just want to add my voice to the chorus of objections to the proposed guidebook in its present form. The proposals outlined in the guidebook may be of benefit to some neighborhoods in Calgary, that has been spoken to by various other people. But the one-size-fits-all approach that is envisioned in the booklet does not seem to be relevant or of benefit to our already great Elbow Park community. You need to send the guidebook back to the city administration so that the historic, stable neighborhoods can be better protected. We don't want our neighborhood to become part of the ongoing disaster that is happening in Marda Group, and we feel that the designations that are presented in the guidebook are the thin edge of the wedge. Thank you. That's my end of presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. White. Thanks for being here. I understand we do have Emma May on the line. Are you there, Emma?
Hey, yeah, I'm here.
I'll slide you in at the end of this panel. Please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Hey, everybody. So my name's Emma May, and oh my God, guess what? I am a resident too of Elbow Park. Could there be any more of us? Anyway, unlike, I guess, maybe some of my neighbors, I'm actually calling in today to support the guidebook. And I do that with a sense of I am not as well-versed in this as many people who come to this. And I think there's been a lot of these, you know, local area planning is a bit of a nerd festival, and it's something that you kind of get into or you don't get into, and I'm going to fully admit that I'm not super into it. And so I trust that my
you are, however, a super nerd.
I am the super
The only
nerd.
reason I'm interrupting you is I realized the timer wasn't on, and I was just letting the clerk know to turn the timer on. Keep going. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting.
Oh, wow, I get more time. No.
No, we took 30 seconds off. Go ahead.
Of course you did. Anyway, okay, so what I do is I do trust to a certain degree that those of you who are actually involved in this deeply understand what the challenges of the city are. So I accept and I understand that the local area plans that will come forth following this process will actually address many of the concerns that my neighbors have regarding how it is that density gets played into our neighborhoods. What I do accept, though, is that fundamentally we have to densify this city. It is absolutely fiscally unsustainable for us to continue the way we have been going. We have not been paying for the basic infrastructure costs, as Teresa, speaker before me, pointed out so clearly, that keep this city going. And so, you know, at the end of the day, we need to actually make sure that we discontinue sprawl. And to some degree, we all have to pay, you know, we all have to be part of that. Just because I live in one community or someone lives in a different community, we can't say, oh, well, we don't need to participate in this process. We're all in this together. And if we want to pay our taxes and have our city run as the way it is, then we need to accept that densification is part of this program. I guess that's kind of all I really had to say. I just wanted to go on record as saying that, you know, also today I think we've heard from, and yesterday we heard from a lot of speakers who I think brought a lot of, there was just stuff said that was really, quite frankly, disgusting. And I think as people who live in single-family homes in other neighborhoods, I want my parents to be able to retire in the communities that they live in.
I request that Council Mott and the North Hill Plan.
Sorry, we've got someone who's not muted, please. There we go. Go ahead, Emma.
Okay, sorry. Anyway, I just wanted to say that yesterday I found very disheartening. And I think some of the things that were said, we need to take a really good look at ourselves as a city and say, you know, just because we feel that we are fearful of what changes might come before us, that doesn't mean that we need to, you know, lash out. And it means that we need to take a really good, hard look at how it is that we want our cities to grow so that they are inclusive and they are diverse, and that those of us who have the benefit of living in really great places find a way that we can share our communities with others. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks for the time, guys.
Thanks very much, Ms. May. Councillor Farkas with a question for this panel. Councillor Farkas.
Thank you, Worship. For Hugoline, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
But I just wanted to apologize on behalf of my colleagues for you to be feeling in such a way that either you're intimidated or you don't want to participate in the hearing. And I just want to say you did a great job in terms of presenting. I wanted to give you the opportunity to provide any follow-up or the question that you wanted to ask.
Yeah, just a quick point. I made multiple attempts on behalf of EFRA, the Elbow Park Residents Association, to meet with anyone in the mayor's office, but was declined. So, Mayor Nenshi, if you are available for a meeting, we would greatly appreciate it. The second point is, I get that the city doesn't have jurisdiction over the CBE, but a plan like this, when it will definitely impact school populations, I think that the CBE needs to be part of that consultation process. And if they have not yet been part of that process, then I would think that that needs to happen pronto. That's a very important element for a change like this.
Great, thank you very much.
You.
And a procedural question. Sorry, you go ahead.
If you don't mind, I'll just respond, Ms. Morton. It is my practice to not meet with people prior to a public hearing so that I can go into the public hearing as unbiased as possible. That is the practice I have continued for many years, and I will continue it. However, if you have specific items that you feel were not raised in the public hearing that I need to understand, please put in a request, and I'd be happy to look at that. Back to you, Councillor Farkas.
Yeah, and a procedural question for you, Your Worship. There's been a number of questions raised through the public hearing, like that one where whether the CB and the Catholic School District provided comments on the guidebook and the implications for them. Are city staff taking down these questions, and are they going to be providing some sort of follow-up, or is it up to us as council members to be writing down these questions as we hear them and then to use our time to be asking the questions? I'm just concerned about that.
We heard.
I'm just concerned about that feedback loop.
We heard from administration yesterday that they are writing down everything, but as you know, our practice is that it is the job of the councillor to carry the questions that they need administration to answer post the public hearing.
Thank you. And given the importance of having accurate information out there, how are we circling back to those residents who participated today to ensure that the issues that they raised do actually get some follow-up?
Excellent question for administration at the end of the public hearing.
All right, great. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. All right, so let us now go
Your Worship?
to... Yes?
Your Worship, Sean Chu here.
Yes?
Sean Chu here. I just got a text. Someone texted me and said, could not get on in time for Susan Trylinski. I think she's online waiting.
Okay, no problem. That she's right on the list now, so I'll call her next for the panel. Thank you, Councillor Chu.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Let us then create the next panel. And Ms. Trylinski, are you there?
No, but it's Chris Davis, and I mentioned earlier I'd be speaking on her behalf, Your Worship.
Yes, and you may have heard me speaking with Ms. Poole reminding us
I did.
that each citizen has only 5 minutes. So give me the 10 seconds on your case for why I should give you 5 more minutes.
Only because Ms. Trylinski has recently had a death in the family and can't attend today, and she's asked me to speak as her agent. And in the interest of a fair hearing, I'm sure that you will allow me that opportunity.
Do you actually have a statement from her that you're reading, or are you giving us your thoughts?
She's given me her notes and her emails and texts, so I can't directly send it in to you.
All right, I'm going to ask you to be very, very, very disciplined, Mr. Davies. All I want to hear is you literally reading the emails and texts. If it's any more than that, then I can't allow you the time.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'm sorry, I'm just going to say this because others have said it before. My last name is Davis, Davis.
You know what?
Thank you.
I 100% know that, and it's written down here as Davies, and I've been like, have I been saying his name wrong for many years? But you're okay with that, Mr. Davis?
Thank you. I am fine, thank you.
Okay. Otherwise, I would, like with Ms. Poole, get you to just email them, but if they are disparate, I'll give you the time to quickly read them. All right. Noel Keough, are you there, Professor Keough?
Yes, I am.
Thanks. You'll be second on this panel. How about David White? Are you there?
Yes, I am, Your Worship.
All right. Thank you. You'll be third on this panel. Do we have Ali McMillan? Ali, are you there? All right. Do we have Alkarim Devani?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, you're going to be fourth on this panel. And do I have Deborah Wong?
Yes, I'm here.
You're going to be fifth on this panel, if that's all right. Okay, so we're going to go to Mr. Davis, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks very much, Your Worship and members of council. Ms. Trylinski is a resident of Mayfair, Bel Air, and lives on Melville Place, Southwest. She acknowledges and adopts the community presentation made earlier today as part of Panel 9. And she also adopts the materials and concerns filed by her 10 fellow community members found at pages 879, 887, 888, 895, 898, 901, 914, 917, 932, and 1086. As Melville Place faces Elbow Drive, separated by a modest but valuable edge part, it has the potential to be incorporated into a future neighborhood connector, Section 2.6 of the Guidebook, or possibly a neighborhood flex, Section 2.3. Unfortunately, the community's original commercial service area was largely lost to the GE5 transportation project about 10 years ago. The policies in Section 2.7 to Ms. Trylinski make sense, specifically Section 2.7D at page 42. Non-residential development in neighborhood connector should, firstly, provide a built form and scale that considers the surrounding residential context and 2, mitigate impacts such as noise and vehicle circulation on adjacent residential uses. As noted on page 38, a neighborhood connector represents the more residentially oriented areas of our communities. The public realm is designed to support low to moderate volumes of pedestrian movement along the street, and the built form typically supports privacy and separation for residential uses. Finally, based on the unsatisfactory delivery of a recent and continuing commercial use application at a prominent location 60 meters from her house, she respectfully asks that we can and must strive to do better. If the guidebook will help us better deliver on growth as we continue to evolve our city, she supports the guidebook. And I heard a click, Your Worship. I just wanted to confirm that you were able to hear my presentation.
You're still here, Mr. Davis. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's it, and I appreciate all your time and the staff, and I'll be available for questions should they arise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Keough, are you there?
I am, yes.
The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Nenshi. So I've got several comments I want to make today to contribute to the process. First of all, just want to say my name is Noel Keough. I'm co-founder of Sustainable Calgary, and I've taught sustainable planning in the School of Architecture, Planning and Landscape for about 15 years here in Calgary. I've lived here about 40 years. I've been a renter. I've lived in a secondary suite. I've lived in a housing cooperative, and I've owned my own home. I've lived in the Beltline, Temple, Dalhousie, West Hillhurst, Sunnyside. The first thing I want to say is I do support this plan, the Guidebook for Great Communities, and I do sincerely hope that Council finds the means to ratify this plan by the end of this public hearing process. Secondly, I would like to say that I've been involved in public processes and planning the city for about 25 years of my 40 years here. And I think that this GGC is a critical piece of the puzzle that we've been working on for 20 years. To me, this is part of the process that we began with Imagine Calgary, with Planet, the Municipal Development Plan, Calgary Transportation Plan, the Bike Strategy, the Walking Strategy, the Resilience Strategy. All of these pieces of the puzzle are critical for us to move forward on the original 100-year vision that we created with Imagine Calgary. And I think that vision is getting us to, it includes a more dense city where we live a little bit closer together. It includes a city where we're less dependent on the private automobile to get around, but it also is a city that will be an improvement in our quality of life, and it will be a city that will be more fiscally stable. For all these reasons, I think we need this GGC now. The GGC is consistent with Sustainable Calgary research. I'm a co-founder of Sustainable Calgary and have worked in this kind of research for 20 plus years. We have produced a lot of work over that time, including the State of Our City reports for over 20 years now, the Healthy Places project that we recently completed, and the Neighborhood Active Transportation Network policy proposal that we put forward just this year. All of this work that we've been doing tells me that the GGC is something that we need to ratify now. I think also it's consistent with the global best practices. I've traveled to cities around the world. This kind of process is happening around the world. Many of the cities that I visited are ahead of the curve of us on this process. And the good thing is here that we don't have to think of this as something that's compromising our communities. This is the way of the future for cities in the world. Many of those cities are ahead of us. And what we have out there is lots and lots of experimentation. So I'm confident that the planners at our city can learn and consult with these cities around the world to make sure that the outcomes of this GGC and this whole process that we're involved in is going to create a better quality of life for all of us. If anything, I think the GGC in its current form is rather modest, and I support the notion that it will be a living document that we will be able to affect and change over time as we learn in our own experience and from places around the world. I also have been a resident of Sunnyside for 20 plus years now, and I think it's really important. Well, in my experience, I've been involved with the TOD ARP process. That process maybe, 15 years ago now, which I saw as kind of a prototype of what we're going through now with the GGC. And I think one of the things that we realize there is that no process is perfect, But we do have to recognize or accept that I think the city and planners are acting in good faith. They're coming up with the best product. In this particular case, I think there's been a lot of consultation, and it is time to move forward with a good enough project at this point in time that is capable of changing as we go forward. I think one of the things that I'd like to point out is that there's a lot of discussion of this losing of character of neighborhoods, and I really kind of object to that. And in my experience in Sunnyside is it's not a homogenous community. It's got all sorts of different urban form, and it's one of the most beautiful communities in the city, in my opinion. It's a well-functioning community that's supportive and welcoming of all kinds of demographics, and it functions really well. So I think rather than looking at what we might be losing in character, or even assuming that the only, quote, character that we have is single-family homes kinds of character, my community has just as much character as a community that is exclusively single-family homes. And I see what we're doing now not as a problem, but as an opportunity. The last thing that I would say is that the city is always engaged, and over 25 years I've been engaged in countless hours and hours and days of consultations of all kinds, and even this past year, many, many different consultations, whether it's the budget or the MDP, all kinds of different consultations. So at some point we have to say we've done the best we can do and we have to move forward. And I think what we're facing in not moving it forward at this point in time is kind of the big looming question for me and for many of us, and that's climate change and the need to transition.
And the state of our city you are at time, Noel, so I'm going to ask you to wrap up in a sentence, please.
Yeah, okay. So the last thing I will say is just to reiterate what I started with. I think this plan is good. It's good enough, and it's time to move forward. So I hope by the end of this process, we can ratify this GGC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for being here with us. Let's go to Mr. White. Are you there?
Yes, Your Worship.
Please
good
go ahead.
afternoon. Yes, my name is Dave White, and principal of Civic Works. The Civic Works team appreciates this opportunity to share some public input on the guidebook and the recommendations before you. I'll clarify, for Civic Works, we have a city building industry stake in this dialogue. We're a Calgary-based urban planning consultancy, and we collaborate with and support developer builders who are actively investing in Calgary's established areas. I also had the opportunity to serve on the administration-led Established Areas Growth and Change Strategy Advisory Group, and I was a member of a PUD-struck panel of varied community and industry stakeholders who engaged with administration and among each other on the content and the role of the guidebook. So today I wanted to express with that background how critical I and the Civic Works team believe it is for Council to adopt the guidebook and put a foundation stone under Calgary's next generation planning system. It's important to point out that at risk is all the multi-stakeholder work of the larger established areas growth and change strategy. Without the guidebook, the progress made and the work yet to come will likely evaporate. So that includes things like enabling planks around funding and finance, linked to the idea that with density must come amenity, and a very focused exploration on new ways and strategies to realize greater public and private investment within growth priority areas in identified local area plans. It's our opinion that the guidebook is ready and is even better for the more recent additional engagement and refinement undertaken at PUD's direction last summer. It's a multi-year policy-making process that began in 2018, and it was developed through the engagement of a range of stakeholders from community to industry over the last 5 years. The need for the guidebook is about context and the many challenges at the front lines of growth and change. These are varied challenges experienced by all stakeholders operating within our current planning system. Navigating our current system is made so much harder when there is so much uncertainty, when you have 1 foot in the past and 1 foot in the future. There are some of us case-making woefully dated and protectionist policies, while others champion policies that enable thoughtful growth and the new amenities and the investments that must come with that growth. We need a more predictable planning system with a clear and contemporary set of implementation guidelines for growth and change in our established areas. While these foundational guidelines are critical, it's important for all stakeholders to understand that the guidebook is intended to be a living document with an ongoing monitoring and sustainment program, important both to members of the community and industry. It absolutely must be a document we refine, amend, and make even better over time as we build new local plans and learn through on-the-ground implementation. This will supercharge a significant administration-led body of work, from creating over 40 new local plans to the all-important next-generation land use bylaw. On the debate around the guidebook's low-density residential policies, it's our perspective that it does strike the right balance, identifying strategic locations and guiding criteria to enable the greatest range of development forms in those areas experiencing growth, yet being more restrained in other areas that have yet to enter the natural life cycle of redevelopment. Importantly, these are policies that are calibrated to where there is active and significant market interest and investment, both by private development industry and the city through its own investments in public infrastructure and amenities. It's in the Bridgeland and Bowness communities where redevelopment is active. It's not Lake Bonavista and Tuscany. These are policies that are clear, that make good common sense, and they're appropriate for a city like ours that will always be evolving and redeveloping. Most plainly, on the matter of low-density residential, the guidebook will not change the fact that single-family detached homes are and will continue to be a significant part of the mix in Calgary, and that will be for the extreme long term. To wrap it up, Civic Works team sees this guidebook as an essential piece to launching a new planning system that is more clear and predictable. It is a system that can enable thoughtful growth and new investment in Calgary's established areas. And so with that, I would encourage Council to adopt the guidebook as proposed, and thank you for your time and patience. I know it's been a long public hearing. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Mr. White. Let's go to Mr. Devani, please. Are you there?
Yeah, Your Worship. My name is Alkarim Devani. I'm one of the co-founders of Round Square and co-founder of a recent prop tech company called Chroma Property Technologies. I've had the honor and privilege to work in established neighborhoods for the last 13 years. I can vividly remember the first semi-detached project that we worked on, and 13 years ago, most of the struggles we had was around context of immediate neighbors and setbacks, and that eventually evolved into, 3-story infills that were heavy in demand, and what were the heights and shadows and neighbors' privacy concerns that we had. And, as our business evolved and the market evolved, so did we with championing the RCG and trying to bring more row houses into established communities, as we saw a demand for families who couldn't afford, semi-detached homes. Our most recent work also involves being champion of the main streets and mixed-use places, and how do we create place-making opportunities for places for people to collide and create more affordability and access to housing for those who typically wouldn't have had access to their neighborhoods, or those who don't have access to aging in place. And so I can't urge council enough to explain that the guidebook is our future. It's laying the foundation for what our city should look like 50 to 100 years from now. We need to find a way to be inclusive, and we need to be a way to attract the young demographics from sticking around. And I can't begin to emphasize how this is the path towards innovation for us. I'm super excited about where our city's going, and I think this is a logical right step towards a more sustainable and predictive growth pattern. I know a lot of folks like to focus on new growth versus established growth, and council and the city has done an incredible job on making new growth more sustainable and more dense and doing it the right way. And I just want to kind of reinforce the fact that it's not either or, it's both. We will always need both. We will always need new growth, and we need established areas growth, and we need to find a way to make it more viable. Our company has successfully been able to be nimble enough and kind of jump through the hurdles to see successful development in the established areas. But in order for us to meet our targets and find real sustainable growth, we need to make it more predictable. And I think that's for both communities and for private sector development. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Mr. Devani. Let's go to Ms. Wong, please. Are you there?
Yes, I am, Your Worship.
Please
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you, Your Worship, and the City Council for having me. My name is Deborah, and I am a proud resident in Ward 8, and I'm a community organizer with Calgary's Future. Echoing with what Sustainable Calgary, the Climate Hub, and Alberta Eco Trust have said here, I'm here to express my support for the Guidebook. When I first moved to Calgary 10 years ago to pursue my education, I was blown away by how vibrant our city was. But I was also shocked by how spread out it is. Coming from a big city, I never had to rely on cars to get around because there was always great transit infrastructure in place. That being said, I couldn't afford a car until I was in my early 20s. So I spent the majority of my commute on transit to get to places like grocery store, rec centers, schools, and work. So when I first moved to Calgary, I lived in Deep South. Buses came every 30 minutes during rush hour, and every hour or every an hour and a half, if you're lucky, on weekends. I was fortunate to have a great network of friends who are very generous to offer rides to work at times, but I know many Calgarians aren't that lucky. On one hand, I understand that it's hard to justify more frequent transit when ridership is low, but why are we expanding on more communities and encouraging sprawling when we don't have sufficient infrastructure to support existing community? Our current sprawl is not sustainable. It should not take Calgarians 1 hour drive to get from one side of the city to another each trip, right? Calgary will continue to grow, and building out is not an option. And we need a sensible plan to accommodate population growth. I truly believe that Calgary has the potential to be a world-class city, and that's one of the many, many reasons Calgarians chose to live here. But we need better and more affordable housing and transit infrastructure in the inner city to continue having that Calgary's advantage. One of our Calgary's the Future member recently wrote an opinion piece on his experience working at road maintenance and the costly impact of urban sprawl. I cannot agree more. COVID has presented many challenges for businesses and governments, and we need to be fiscally responsible for our tax dollar. We cannot afford to sprawl more, and we need to live within our means. Creating new roads, infrastructure, amenities all come at a cost to Calgarian taxpayers. Increasing our existing capacity to serve more Calgarians in the inner city is the most common sense and cost-effective choice. With the recent announcement for downtown YMCA closure and previous debate around closing Repsol Pools downtown, there is an urgent need to revitalize our downtown and ensuring that our existing communities are being taken care of. And this is what the Guidebook is all about. We need to create a city that's attractive to young professionals and talents. I understand and recognize that the Guidebook is not perfect, but we need it to move forward to the right direction. Caring for community should not be a partisan issue, and it's very disturbing to see some groups spreading misinformation around the Guidebook to our general public. What is even more disturbing is to see some council member endorsing that type of behavior. We are better than this. In closing, I hope that the council will vote yes to the Guidebook so that we can create better, sustainable, and economical future together. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ms. Wong. That takes us to the end of this panel, and I'm going to go to Councillor Davison, who has some questions, and then we're going to take a brief break and come back in a half hour. So, Councillor Davison, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. My question will be for Mr. White.
Yes, happy to answer.
Hey, thanks for joining us. I'm always so impressed by the level of engagement you guys do out in the community on projects you're working on. And I guess my question would be, surrounding best practices going forward for public consultation on this. I think we've heard from a lot of people, they're not so opposed to the idea, but they do feel like there's more conversation that needs to happen. And so if that were to happen going forward, what would you give council as advice?
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Davison, thanks for the question. What I'd say first is that, having engaged extensively through multi-year, multi-channel event opportunities related to the Guidebook, And also the emerging pilot local area plans. North Hill is obviously the one attached to what's being discussed today. This was a robust best practice and resource intensive effort for the scale of what this is. And so I think that I tip my hat to administration first and foremost, and also recognize that iterations of this, including going back to last summer with committee of council, required and sought additional opportunities for information sharing and best practice engagement and refinement, and being very clear through reporting about what that was. So I think this was a standout process, and I certainly, for the type of work that we do, if we were engaged in something of this scale, I think that this did set the bar pretty high, and I think Dr. Keough is also kind of emphasized his own experience, and I would agree with that there's just a tremendous amount of engagement that needs to go into these types of efforts, and this one is risen to the occasion. Advice I would have, Councillor Davison, to what else could be done in this case. I would simply say that a number of speakers have emphasized this. I did as well, that this is the foundation of a set of policies to help make local area plans that are just beginning, and one is before you today. And I can tell you from an industry perspective, we were insistent on a sustainment and monitoring program to ensure that there's not only robust information that's provided to all stakeholders, including community, but there's an opportunity to, through ongoing dialogue and engagement, ensure that these can be refined and improved in the long term. So my advice to council, as we learn through making new local area plans and implementation on the ground, is I'd underline the importance of the monitoring and sustainment program, just like you have with the MDP and the land use bylaw today, and just ensure that administration knows how incredibly important it is to get that right. And you can safely put this into motion and know that the belts and braces are there. I'll just leave it there, Councillor Davison, if I've at all addressed your question.
Yeah, no, sure. And I know trying to ask advice from development folks can always be tricky, because often we have sort of, the same people oppose individual projects that might be here opposing what we have here before us today. You and Mr. Devani, and either of you can jump in on this, talked a little bit about the business side of this. And so, one of the questions I would have is that, often I think what we hear from the business angle here in Calgary is it's about the development permit process. They'd like faster DPs, like we see in other jurisdictions. And so does this document solve the path to faster development and putting more people to work and encouraging that tax base? Or, in your opinion, does it cause red tape?
Through your worship, Mr. Devani may have his own thoughts on this, but I think what this does is take the noise out of what I was characterizing as one foot in the past and one foot in the future. So how can we talk about higher order growth policies ad nauseum, the MDP, Imagine Calgary, its goals, 50-50 split, growing differently, key focuses on nodes and corridors, and yet have policies that are, in some cases as old as the early 1980s, that were written under a whole different paradigm of relatively protectionist and insular kind of thinking that was appropriate for the time. And it's not, Calgary's, is not special for having those policies in place from that era. But if we're going to realize any of the city's own more contemporary goals, we have to modernize this, and I think it comes exactly with what the guidebook is intending to do. So it is good for, I think, all stakeholders in terms of a clear-eyed, understandable, and predictable series of outcomes that are more stable. Because I think it's the instability and the notion of ad hoc and spot rezoning and that adds so much consternation to the process, and then it adds so much more time, energy, and effort by all involved in the public processes. Frustration for members of council who are engaging on the same kind of misalignment over and over again with folks that are concerned, understandably. So I think it's good for all stakeholders to bring alignment between those contemporary policies and being able to update the old. That's my perspective from a planning kind of consulting practice. I'm not sure if Mr. Devani is still on the line.
For sure, yeah, and I'd like Mr. Devani's opinion, because from our perspective, we rarely hear developers tell us we need a guidebook for something, but rather, they're kind of more in favor of get out of our way, let us do our job. We're the investor, we're the experts, we know what we're doing, and so, we'd like to move down that path faster. And so, just curious as to whether or not you think that this guidebook addresses that or not, from a developer point of view.
Still here. Through your worship and Councillor Davidson, I think, we've heard several times, like, what is this guidebook? If it's not a land use bylaw plan, why do we need it? And I think the reality is it sets the framework of predictability. And so it sets us on the path that we've been down for the last 5 years of updating very old policy. And so I don't think the path to
all of our representatives are assisting other callers at this time.
Oh dear.
Your call is very important to us.
No,
somebody's trying to book a WestJet
in the order it was
vacation.
received.
Oh, now we get the music. I was just waiting for the music. All right. Everyone, look at their phones
amazing.
and make sure you're muted, please. We're going to miss the whole music. Go ahead, Mr. Devani.
Yeah, I could have used the music, so I was about to drop the mic. Just kidding. But when we think about our growth strategy, the next step is to work on the local area plans. And so I think I was saying predictability and real scale development will come from larger developers, and we'll see better business cases if we can create predictability for the Brookfields of the world. But today there is no predictability. It's much too ad hoc, and there's no certainty of outcome. And so I know a lot of folks, but it's not. It's looking for how do we build a better city, and I think we need to figure out ways to build better communities within our established areas growth and help them be revitalized and help them retain the assets that are there instead of losing those assets and losing that investment.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks, folks. Appreciate the answers.
Super. And with that, let's take a half-hour break. We will be back at 3:48 p.m. We'll make it 3:50 p.m.